Please come. Just ensuring that there is no toppling of glass in the midst of my talk. Well, welcome back after a sumptuous lunch. It's always the most difficult session after the lunch. It's easy to put the hands together. It's equally easy to put your eyelids together. Under the circumstances, this is a survey around which this seminar is happening. But unfortunately, a survey, and when you talk about a report of a survey, it's usually the most boring document that you can imagine. You're talking about statistics. And saying a warm welcome to friends and colleagues. Most of the dignitaries have left, so we have the friends and colleagues and my senior teacher who had just gave a very inspiring keynote address, and I was very thrilled to hear that. It will be a tough act to follow, especially post-lunch. I'll just say this, that I've been very fortunate to study under Sheikh Bhai and also his guru, K.G. Subramanian. That was a double whammy. And I really consider myself extremely, extremely lucky. When I was in Shantiniketan, Mani Sahab was in Shantiniketan, then I came to Baroda. I found Sheikh Bhai as my teacher. And some of those classes that he was mentioning is a tradition which it's still, if I think about some of those classes and the experiences that I've had, makes my hair stand on its end. Because they really were that kind of excitement. And you must have assessed from the way he made a presentation, he's equally enthusiastic about it even now at this age. It's a very, very tough act to follow. But I will humbly say that we are continuing or trying our level best to continue with that tradition, though it's an impossible feat to carry on, like taking a same class in 3 different languages beyond me or beyond my colleague here, Vasudevan Akitam, who actually continue that tradition of artists or studio practice teachers taking an art history class. So that tradition is very much on. Having said that, I will come straight to the point. That is a sort of a report on the survey. Now, a few words about how the survey began. I think passingly, Professor Shiv Kumar at his introductory speech did mention how it all got started. It was in 2013 that after a conclave on art education in Goa, some of the people who participated in it felt that rather than, and when you talk about art education, it's always end in a lament, because the state of art education is not what you would imagine it to be, what you would want it to be. And we all know that, and we have lots and lots of anecdotal references. And the funny thing is that ever since the 1980s, there is a proliferation of art colleges. There are many universities who come up with a fine arts department. And yet when you look at the art scene, you realize that most of them are not really contributing in a sort of dynamic fashion to the art world, which is a very dynamic art world. So it's kind of inversely proportional. The number of art colleges are going up. The number of interesting artists are also going up. But the interrelationship between them seems to be going astray somewhere. And so we thought, well, what can we do about it? And then we thought, okay, let's look at some basic data. How many art colleges do you have? We don't know. Nobody knows. You go to the Lalitkala Kala Academy, they don't know. Each state has different kinds of art colleges. There are things which are affiliated to the university, departments or faculties. Then there are private art colleges, which is a rather new phenomena. Then you have other private colleges which are giving diplomas. Then you have state-run colleges which are often looked after by Department of Technical Education. Even in the national scene, you have UGC as well as AICTE, which is formulated to looking into technical education. So there seems to be a problem about whether art is to be looked at as part of the larger issue of humanities and social sciences, or is it part of technical education? We haven't resolved that problem. The first issue that strikes you when you look at the state of art schools, art colleges for that matter, is a complete lack of data on a national scheme. You just basic things like how many art colleges are there, where they are, what kind of courses do they offer, and you draw a blank because there is no central agency which will give you the data. So we kind of scratched our heads and said, rather than lamenting, let's do something about it. Now, what do you do? So we formed a trust, and we took upon ourselves to do a job of collecting data, which, as you can imagine, was an area where angels fear to tread, because it is so diverse and the land is so big and we had no resources whatsoever to talk about. But we thought enough is enough of sitting around a table and lamenting or complaining or whining about it. Let's do something. And that's the core idea, the seed idea, where it all started. Now, considering the scope and scale of the job and the fact that there was no institutional support, and we did look for institutional support, we knocked on many doors, but nothing was forthcoming. A private donor, who also happens to be a member of the committee that took this call and formed the foundation, that is Vivan Sundaram, came forward with a private grant, and subsequent to that he has formed his own trust, the Shergill Sundaram Foundation, which has supported us in some ways, and that's all we had to show as far as sponsorship is concerned. So this budget was absolutely minuscule, and then the work continued, and it started in 2014. Within a year it covered 31 art colleges covering 4 states. Then subsequently the 4 states became 5 because Andhra Pradesh was split into Telangana and Andhra. And that report, that those 31 colleges in the state of being, was presented in a conclave in Kochi, which we did with the help of, in collaboration with the KMB, that is the Kochi Muzeris Biennale Foundation, in 2015. Subsequent to that, that is between 2016 and 2018, in fits and starts, the work happened. We sent surveyors to cover colleges with a data sheet. I'll show you what the data sheet looks like. We managed to cover 80, covering 14 states, which is well, considering that we are 29 states and not all of them have art colleges, it's not a bad number, but there are major omissions, and I'll talk about that. The survey posed its own problems, and let me state them at the onset. A questionnaire was framed with a hope that the volunteer surveying them would bring in additional data in the form of a written report and photographs of the physical infrastructure. Now, some volunteers did that, some didn't. The questionnaire itself left out a quantum of qualitative data and had to focus on the quantitative aspect, because that's always easy to survey, and as far as data are concerned, it's, as anybody who has collected data knows, that quantitative data is much more difficult to analyze and access than qualitative data than quantitative data. It's all about numbers, basic simple things about where the college is situated, who's the principal, what is its address, who is it affiliated to, how many students are there, what kind of courses they offer, how much space is there in the classroom, how many books are there in the library, whether the library has Wi-Fi connection or not, and eventually then you can use that data to come to some more statistics about the percentage of the student each teacher, how many students they teach, which has a sort of bigger library than others. And there are colleges which are equipped with certain basic infrastructure. There are other colleges which are very poor in infrastructurally, and all that kind of thing. So the data is there to be mined. We have collected the primary data. Given and it does have a stress on the quantitative aspect of the data, and I'm stating this at the very onset. Although there are elements which I will show you the questionnaire itself, and you can see it for yourself, that there are certain things which ask about the quality of things, but that data is very difficult to collate, and that is the job of somebody who's really trained in it. And we were like really greenhorns in this business of collecting data. So whatever has been done is done only with this zeal and goodwill that we needed some primary data. We need to begin somewhere. And that was the motivating factor behind this. And the resources, as I said, were virtually non-existent. The next problem was paucity of qualified surveyors, and we couldn't really train them. You can only train them to some extent if you're communicating with them on the phone or the email. So some surveyors took it upon themselves to do the job very conscientiously, some others did not. Then the other problem was the colleges themselves, because who's FIAE? What is their locus standi? We are not a government organization, and when you go and ask for data, many colleges are very suspicious of them. Although we send them prior letters, intimations to the concerned administrative authority that, why we are doing it and how it all started. There were some instances where people are very reluctant to part with data very basic. I don't know why, because we are not insisting on data. There was a column which talked about what's the kind of funding they get, but that was an optional column. You can choose to fill it or not fill it. And yet we felt that there was a certain resistance in some colleges in parting with that basic data. Some people even treated it as like a national security issue. I remember sending somebody to Srinagar, for instance, for a variety of reasons. They were very, very cagey about parting with. So finally, we had to leave them out. Even Jammu, for that matter, was. Then there are some who said it straight on our face that we won't do it. We don't want you. And why do you want this data? Despite us trying our level best to explain that, this is not going to be used for any negative purposes. It's just for the purpose of making a survey to find out what's the state of art education throughout the length and breadth of the country. Some were not convinced. So that was another roadblock that we had to account for. And I would so the all said and done, it's an incomplete survey. And a comprehensive survey can only be done with official sanction and resources, and we had none. Besides, for a survey to remain up to date, it needs to be done simultaneously across the length and breadth of the country, because the longer it takes, the chances of data getting obsolete increases, and that doesn't need any explanation, and we couldn't do it any faster than this. It took us 6 years. It was only the desire to make it happen that resulted in this survey, and admittedly, in the absence of anything better, this is all that we have at this point of time. So having said that, let me move on to the kind of questionnaire we had. So these are the sort of list of colleges that are covered that makes up that number 80, and we did have to leave some very important colleges out for a variety of reasons. I will mention that also in the process. And this was the question sheet that was sent. So as you can see, some pretty basic data, and I'm not reading them out. I'm sure all of you can read them, right? We can't scroll it. It's a slide, but I can give you a questionnaire. This is just to give an idea. Don't try to read everything. You can have it. It's with us. And this is something which could have gotten us some quantitative data. And then finally the whole thing was collated into an Excel sheet. Now that Excel sheet will give you an idea of the enormity of the issues that we're dealing with. That is 1/3 of it. And this is typed at 0.7. Yeah. Just for the illustration of you can only read it like this. And seeing it in an Excel sheet, your mouse is going like that, back and forth, if you want any data. So we thought, okay, can you just hold this? Thank you. We can break it down to even smaller segments, which is what we did. So these are some of the basic infrastructural information, number of students, courses offered, kind of spaces that we managed to get. So admittedly, we could cover only 14 states out of the total 29 states. And even there, we had to leave out some major institutions, like I said, for a variety of reasons. You will find that the most famous and the oldest art school of Western India, Sir J.J. School of Art, is not covered. You will find that Jamia Millia University in Delhi or the newest school, that is Shiv Nadar University, is not covered. And we hope to do that. So at least we could say at the end of the day that of the 14 states, all major institutions have been taken care of, at least are part of this survey. The sample size was large enough to draw certain conclusions, and with this primary data, it is hoped that anybody who wants to build on this resource, add to it, or draw different lessons can do so. The idea is to also put them up in our website. The FIE has a website, so that anybody who is researching it, for any further research on this data should be available freely to such people. And that is one of the main things why we undertook this. It's not that we are going to, make the most of this data. Hopefully, if this data is there in the public domain, people can draw their own conclusions, make their own surveys, add to it, and take something from it as well. So you've already seen the questionnaire. The very first column of the survey indicates what kind of affiliation the college has, and of the 80 colleges covered, they're affiliated to state universities, both government and private sector. Then there are some have the AICT, like I said, and so the rest to the UGC, and or some to the Department of Technical Education, that is mostly in Kerala. Then there are state universities and central universities. What is amply clear is that there is a policy confusion about the status of art colleges. Some are treated as technical education, where others broadly as part of the humanities, which I have already mentioned. And there are only 4, namely Sarojini Naidu School at Hyderabad Central University, the LK Mahavidyalaya, Hampi University, the Ambedkar University of Delhi, that is AUD, and the Department of Visual Art Kalyan University, West Bengal, that offer exclusively postgraduate studies. The other 2, the relatively new Shiv Nadar University of Greater Noida and School of Art and Aesthetics, JNU, are not surveyed. Now, SNU because of shortage of surveyors, and JNU because it does not offer any studio courses. So we thought we will concentrate on colleges which offer studio-based, practice-based thing. JNU, as you know, is more about ideas, theories, and that sort of stuff. They don't really have a studio art section. So of the remaining 76 colleges, only 26 offer postgrad level studies along with undergrad courses. And all others, that is 50 plus of them, are entirely devoted to undergraduate level teaching. And quite a few of them offer only diploma. And Karnataka, surprisingly, has the most number of colleges which offer diplomas, but those diplomas are like 5-year diplomas. So they are not even aligned with the rest of the country, where we have already shifted to 4-year BFA courses or 4-year diploma structures. And the total number of students in 3 colleges of Tamil Nadu is 852 undergraduate and 124 PG students. Yeah, this is another section that you could we could cull from there, is about the library. How many books are there in the library, whether there is internet connection in the library or not. And these are a sort of descending order. So only 1 or 2 colleges of each state which seems to have a functioning library are included in this. And there are 22 of them. Well, as a matter of fact, 21 of them. There are the maximum number of books that has been given to us in the survey is 20,000, and the minimum is 600. So again, there is this great disparity, and I'm not even showing the ones which says that there is no functioning library in the department or the faculty. So then comes the sort of number of students state-wise. These are some visuals that are collected to give some idea of the infrastructure they have. These are some of the better equipped colleges. It's an heritage building of one of the oldest art college in the country, that is the Government College of Art, Chennai, Madras. It's a very state-of-the-art art history class in SN School, Hyderabad, which is one of the newest departments. And then you have these kinds of painting studios also, where, you know, the maximum students work in the minimum possible space in undergraduate classes. And they're given basically desks, not even spaces to put up an easel to paint or anything they want to do larger than this desk size, then you are in trouble. I have data from a college in Calcutta which runs a morning class and an evening class. So the people who are using the studios in the morning are asked to vacate everything, including their unfinished work, so that the classes can be taken in the evening, which is terrible. I mean, if you have painting in oil and you have wet oil paintings, where do you store them? And the college doesn't offer any spaces for storage. And yet there is this desire to maximize the usage of space. And mind you, it's a government college, and they are in not a position to shut down their evening courses, because there are people who come for that course who are doing jobs in the daytime. So that's the only time they can offer. So this system is in a catch-22 situation. They know that it's not the ideal situation. At the same time, they can't walk out of it. So, and most colleges do not keep any data on what their students do after they finish. So it would be safe to surmise, however, from experience, that a chunk gets absorbed in teaching both in schools as well as colleges. A small number continue to practice, and the rest diversify into related and sometimes unrelated fields. And the ratio of students and teachers, again, there is a high point and there is a low point. The school in Jaipur, the college seems very comfortable. It's 1:7.1, and the highest from Karnataka, it's 1:54. So you have this range from 1:7, that one teacher teaches 7, to a teacher who's supposed to address a class of 54. And if you are in a studio practice class, mind you, it's not just theory class, it's virtually impossible for one teacher to, give any personalized attention to 54 students in a class. Even if he's a superman or a superwoman, it's beyond his pale. So I'm not showing you every data. I'm just giving you a tip of the iceberg that this is the possible to suss out from this survey. All kinds of data can be mined. And like I said, the library proves to be an interesting indicator. Although that can also be deceptive, because we have got 3 colleges saying the number of books, exact number of books, 5001. Now go figure where that number comes from. 5001, that precision. So sometimes the data provided is also of doubtful quality. So all these are the shortcomings, and I'm being very honest and forthright about it, because it's not a watertight survey, which is an impossibility anyway in these kinds of things. But there are glaring things which even we are aware of collectors or data. But we really had not much choice in this, so we had to do with whatever is provided to us. So it's at best a partial look at the problems, because we are only looking at hard data and that can easily be quantified. Whereas the other data was, people are even less forthcoming about giving the other set of data. The last part of the questionnaire where you ask that, what do you think, will be the strength of the college? Do you really get artists to come and talk to the students? Is there an option of the students holding an exhibition? Are there any clubs run by the students? There are some colleges which outright said, no, we don't encourage any gathering of students. We don't encourage students to do any clubs. They come here, do their work. By 5 o'clock, the college is closed. Then they can go and do whatever they want to do. We don't want to associate with that. I'm not naming, but there have been responses like that it worked like a Sarkari office, 10 to 5. It opens the gate at 10 o'clock, it shuts it at 5 o'clock. If your work is unfinished, if you're in the midst of taking up print, it's your problem, too bad. College shuts. So contrary to what Sheikh Bhai was talking about, a college where you felt at home, which was your studio, it's home where you're living, you're seeing seniors working, you're seeing your teachers working, and you can work through the night. Most colleges actually follow this 10 to 5 routine. Now, this is about data, and this is the other data of how many of these colleges, of the 80, offer only also master's level. The +1, those are the institutes which offer, which is given, the name is given in the bracket. They are the institutes that offer exclusively master level courses. The rest offer both BFA and MFA. And in Karnataka and Maharashtra and Gujarat majorly, there is also a course called ATD, which is called the Art Teachers Diploma, which is a very old course. It's often a 3-year course, which was meant for people who would go into primary school teaching art. The sad fact is that we have done a friend of mine has done another survey of art schools in Baroda. That is all government, not art schools, secondary, primary schools in Baroda. There are 126 primary schools run by the government in Baroda district, and of them only 6 employ art teachers. The other 120 have stopped employing art teachers because, and sometimes the mathematics teacher will come and take a class, and Avneet has a book which is how to draw, and they copy it or they color it, and that is all that they do in the name of art. And it's called drawing. And still, the courses, they're called Art Teachers Diploma, An art master's diploma, which is another 2 years after that, runs in many places. Some of the colleges shut down recently in Gujarat for lack of students because less and less people are coming. And that course is kind of frozen in time. Nothing has happened, and eventually it is not finding any interested people to join that course, and yet there are many colleges which we surveyed offer that course. So what makes an art teaching institute effective more than the sum total of number crunching, and what remains singularly important is the quality of teaching. And that is the other aspect that I'm coming to. There are no academic performance index that can correctly measure the worth of a good teacher. The environment of a college that engenders free exchange of ideas and encourage experimentation, interaction with the art world, professionals, exposure to a wide variety of art practices, and these are all issues that are touched upon by Shiv Kumar, by Krishnamachari Bose, and particularly by Sheikh Bhai in his very wonderful presentation. The quality of interaction between teachers and students, the aims and objectives of a particular institution, and many such intangibles that are difficult to quantify. Now, perhaps the more important lessons one might draw from this is that even the best equipped institute might fail if what in today's management derived parlance would be called human resource is not put in place. And human resource has always been a problem area. Okay, this is you can look at it parallelly. I'm kind of done with this, so yeah. Now, human resource. This is one of the big bugbears of human resource. The general trend in art education is increasingly getting score-oriented. It's not unheard of anymore to score 100% in languages or humanities. Why? Because the definition of a correct answer has become increasingly narrow. And this I am giving my personal experience. My daughter, who appeared in 12th examination 3 years back, came home and told me that these are the 3 points of why World War II started. And I said, yeah, but you can have 1 or 2 more, or the order of priority, I would say that this order can be bettered. And she said, no, this is exactly how I'm asked to answer in my examination, or else they will cut marks. Now, if you narrow down a correctness of an answer in a subject like history, which is open to interpretation, you can imagine what happens in school education, in majority of school education, in other subjects which are more technical, and when there is a correct answer. And you have to repeat it in the same order. Any deviation or attempt to question the received wisdom is mercilessly frowned upon, and the scope of subjectivity is almost nil, even in humanities. In a situation like that, we find ourselves in a piquant situation. Why do we mark out ourselves? I'm coming to that. We teach a subject where there are no quote-unquote correct answers. In most cases, there are no textbooks even. We who are in the business of teaching what? Ways of seeing and ways of showing, find pre-digested answers required questioning, deconstructing. And we don't provide them with pre-digested answers, right? So since we are teaching something where rules are made to be broken, rules do not make art by and large, but great art creates rules. So following rules can lead to virtuosity, but creativity is not or never restricted by preset rules. So in teaching art, it's a lot easier to teach technicalities such as how to make a good oil painting or the correct manner of making a lithographic print. But even when we do so, we almost expect students to learn it and then manipulate them to achieve newer ends. Otherwise, we are not allowing them the creative play essential for making art. We are aware that correct and copybook application of oil paint does not necessarily make a good painting, which anybody who was taught in an art school would vouch for that. We all know that whenever art is made a part of a university system, the university tries its level best to fit it within the pattern, a template, if you like, developed for teaching other courses. This attitude that art teaching has to be somehow fitted into an already existing template is not very helpful, to say the least. You're asked to equate a studio practice course with a science lab practical. They're not exactly the same thing, and they never will be. A lecture demonstration followed by hours of hands-on work can hardly be equated with regular lecture for calculation of workload. And these are the kind of problems that are thrown at us on a daily basis, because we are constantly being expected to fit into a template which is not ours to begin with. Allow me to add a few personal observations about teaching art. The artist who would teach is often handicapped even before setting foot in a studio classroom. Appraisals of teaching ability get skewed during the initial job selection process itself. A typical application forms allow few judgments about the quality of one's teaching abilities, but routinely demand some arbitrary quantification, such as 3 years of teaching experience, as a guideline that says little about the quality of teaching. This is a problem of relegating teaching ability to a statistic. This existing problem is compounded when a premium is placed on PhD as a criterion, which is a phenomena that started in 2010, and I'm quoting here from the Gazette notification of UGC. These are the two very points which has been a major roadblock, because it basically states that without a PhD, you will not have any progression in your career. And now the minister has announced that after 2021, anybody who enters any profession of teaching, regardless of whether it's art, it's humanities, or anything else, architecture, design, needs to have a PhD. Now, where do you get that from? Because there are no PhDs today in studio-based things. What we understand as PhD is necessarily a text-based thing. So we have not thought through this problem. We haven't given it the time and attention that it demands. We have just borrowed this from a discipline where it is PhD is almost, de rigueur, that you do a master's and then you go for an MPhil where MPhil is available, or else you go straight for a PhD and you get a PhD before you even think of taking up a job, which is not the case with art education. But, it's a kind of unthinking repetition and duplication of things thought of for another discipline altogether, which has been happening and which, in our view, is proving to be a major detriment. So, as a result, even when higher education may initially attract some first-class artists they do little to support them. It is, after all, hard to imagine placing a full-time teaching career atop a full-time art-making career without something going amiss in the process. And now we have other issues thrown at you on top of that. A major dilemma facing academia today is that it must accommodate not only students who are striving to become artists, but also teachers who are struggling to remain artists. So instead of encouraging practicing artists to continue with the practice, there are inscrutable demands to make them write articles and publish them, often in magazines expressly designed for getting you API scores and nothing else, or to take part in meaningless conferences, excluding this one. The rise of predatory journals has become a cottage industry. Here is a list. It's a global phenomenon, and in India, it is an epidemic. Every other day, I get a mail like this. It's like, come for an international conference in Timbuktu, which covers everything from science to cutting-edge biotechnology, and art and design. Yes, they're a little bit at the end. But you basically go to places like Bishkek, plated to Almaty. So all these very exotic places. And can you imagine a conference where people come and talk about mathematics, biosciences, and art and design together? And everybody is going to present a paper, and then that will get eventually published with an ISSN number in a peer-reviewed quote-unquote journal. It's all a sham. The powers that be have decided that somehow lecturing, taking part in conferences, and publishing in dubious magazines is more important than continuing to practice, as if your contact with the real art world is less important than some phony academic research degree. The misguided emphasis on research and the UGC-dictated race to produce PhDs have created a situation where genuine practitioners are getting increasingly marginalized. The supreme bias in our academic world for the written word over all else is making a mockery of art education. We are in a situation where more we try to ensure quality by making rules, the more we are ending up creating mediocrity because the rules are foreclosing options and exceptions. The more stress we give on quantification, the quality suffers. The more we emphasize common criterion, we take away the agency from the stakeholders. More rules can only make for a bureaucratic solution where everything looks good and uniform on paper, but we lose any semblance of autonomy, variety, and agency. A basic requirement for any institute to flourish. And here I come to the last part. The higher education sector is going through a rough patch, and there are many issues that require urgent attention at the policy-making level. In the absence of any coordinated platform, even within the state, most institutes operate in isolation. So when changes are dictated from the top, it gets very hard to resist and make a stakeholder's voice heard. In our last conference in Kochi, it was suggested that we should try to get a council on the lines of Medical Council of India. But looking at the state in which the Medical Council of India is, I don't think it is very advisable at this point of time. On the other hand, there is also a lack of fresh thinking in the college level, that is on part of the teachers ourselves, an attitude that rarely asks questions, innovate, or try course correction. There are colleges where no syllabi changes have taken place in the last 20 years. A simple question like what a discipline like printmaking stood for in 1990s and what it means now in the age of wholesale shift from analog to digital printing need to be raised and debated and acted upon. A forum like this cannot find ready solutions to any kind of problems. There are admittedly many, but it can induce some questioning. Questions are a good place to begin when you want to change something. This is some of the newspaper cuttings of how we've been trying to work through this whole arbitrary introduction of PhD as a criteria, which has failed miserably so far, but we are still hoping that somebody someday will hear, or else it will be very difficult to continue art education as we know it in the next decade. Now I shall end with raising a few questions about quality, and hopefully we can exchange our views on some of these questions in the course of this conference. And that kind of exchange, I hope, will help us discuss some of the main issues that stare us in the face. And this questionnaire, we have a printed version, and it will be given to whoever is interested, and we would very like to get a feedback on these. There are 9 questions. And the first one, I don't think I need to read them out, do I? Everybody can read, right? So do you feel it's a major problem in art education is the absence of vision, B, infrastructure, C, human resource, or a combination of all three, or something else altogether? At the UG level, do you feel it's enough to teach just skills, or there should be discussions about concepts, ideas, history, etc.? In an art world where increasingly there are multiple ways of creating an image, do you feel the traditional departments of painting, sculpture, printmaking are adequate and watertight, or should we start thinking afresh, making it possible for a student to move from one medium to another, like a workshop model? Then is there a need to teach new media practices, which are again very much visible in the art world per se, but we still don't have any devoted departments? But I also have got this feedback that we don't really need a devoted department. That can be included in the existing department. So where do you think you would stand vis-a-vis that question? And then what in your view is research? That is a big question. Does research necessarily mean writing a thesis? Do artists do research? Do artists produce knowledge? Is making art the same as producing knowledge? And here I remember a very good analogy that Shiv Kumar has given me once, that there are different kinds of artists. There are artists who require a huge amount of research. Sheikh Bhai in the morning session was talking about the installation by Shilpa Gupta, which does take a lot of research, because she's gone and collected those 100 artists' poems, their life stories, and how they're incarcerated for their beliefs. And then she made that installation. But does every artist do that for their artwork? Somebody like Amitabh Ghosh would do enormous amount of research before writing a novel, but James Boyce wouldn't. Now, are we telling people that it's only the Amitabh Ghosh model or the Shilpa Shetty model which will be acceptable to us, and the other model is not to be looked at? And then there are, number 7 is the strategies we can adopt to allow play, which has become a very suspect word. And without play, there is no creativity. And we just are shoving out play from our system. It's all about very hard-nosed research and seriousness and activity, and everything is accounted for, everything is documented. So where do we have play? Where do we have interactivity? Where do we have some sort of a madness, without which there is no creativity? And despite the shortcomings of resources, infrastructure, and manpower, what are the practices, strategies that an institute college can adopt or enhance quality? It's not always, the buck doesn't stop at the gate always at funds. There you can do a lot of things, we can do a lot of things. We can combine our efforts to do a lot of things, which hardly requires much of funding. But we don't seem to look at that option and only think only big money will solve the problem. But that is not necessarily the case. And what would you like to see changed most in the next 5 years? That is a sort of a vision document. So please respond. We would be very, very interested in knowing what the participants, what the audience feel about these rather important and crucial matters. Thank you very much for sitting through a very not so interesting presentation. Thank you.